I was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of tomato sauce, when I heard my stepson's small voice behind me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his tone quiet but serious, almost like he'd been building up the courage for a while. I turned around, expecting something simple, maybe a question about dinner or school. But when I looked at his face, something was different. His eyes, usually bright and full of mischief, were unsure, searching. That's when he asked me the question that stopped me cold in my tracks. For a moment, all I could hear was the soft bubbling of the sauce and the ticking of the kitchen clock. I wasn't prepared for what he said. I had no script in my head, no easy answer. It was one of those moments that sneaks up on you, where life suddenly feels heavier, like something big is shifting under your feet. I stared at him, heart pounding, because deep down I knew this wasn't just a question. This was a turning point. It's funny how ordinary evenings can take a turn you never saw coming. We weren't doing anything special. It was just a weekday. I was in my favorite old hoodie, chopping vegetables. He was supposed to be playing video games in the next room. But something made him pause the game and come to me. Something on his mind that couldn't wait. When you become a step-parent, no one really prepares you for the emotional territory you're going to step into. You think about rules, house chores, school pickup, but it's the quiet, emotional stuff that hits the hardest. And tonight, it came from a little boy who had been slowly learning to trust me. We'd had our rough patches. There were days when I felt like an outsider in my own home, unsure where I stood. But moments like this, where he let down his guard and showed me his heart, those moments made it all worth it. He stood there waiting, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I could see he was nervous, maybe even afraid of how I'd respond. And I'll be honest, I was nervous too. There's something about raw honesty from a child that cuts straight through you. You can't hide. You can't pretend. And I didn't want to. I just wanted to make sure I got it right. I turned the stove down and wiped my hands on a towel, giving him my full attention. "Of course," I said gently. "What is it?" That's when he looked up at me with those wide eyes and said the words I will never forget. It wasn't loud. He didn't shout. But it hit me like a thunderclap. Something so personal, so deep, it brought everything to a halt. And in that moment, I had to make a choice. Say the safe thing, or say the honest thing. I thought about all the times he'd looked at me from a distance, testing me, seeing if I'd stick around. I thought about the walls he'd built and how slowly, piece by piece, we'd been tearing them down. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his trust pressing into my chest. I couldn't say no. Not now. Not after everything. But I also knew that whatever came next would change our relationship forever. There's no going back from a moment like that. And as I opened my mouth to respond, I realized I had no idea how this would end. But I knew one thing for sure. Dinner could wait. Because some questions deserve an answer that changes everything. And what he asked me, well, you'll have to hear it for yourself. He looked up at me, eyes searching mine, and said, "Do you think I could ever call you Dad?" My heart skipped a beat. That word, Dad, hung in the air like a balloon caught in a breeze. It wasn't something I expected to hear. Not that night. Not from him. And not like that. I just stood there for a second, trying to process the weight of what he'd asked. My stepson, Liam, had always been a quiet kid. Thoughtful. He didn't open up easily, especially not to me. He was only 7 when I came into his life, and the early days weren't easy. His mom, my wife now, had been doing everything on her own for years before I came along. Liam was protective of her, like a tiny little guardian. He didn't talk much to strangers, and I was definitely a stranger in the beginning. I remember the first time we met. He had this cautious look, like he was sizing me up. I smiled, offered a handshake. He just stared, then turned and walked away. That pretty much set the tone for the first few months. I wasn't mad. Honestly, I got it. I was the new guy trying to fit into a picture that already had its frame. There were good days here and there, sure. Like the time we built a Lego set together and he actually laughed when I accidentally knocked over a tower we'd spent an hour building. Or the first time he handed me a drawing he made, both of us stick figures, standing under a crooked sun. But even in those moments, I never expected a question like the one he'd just asked. I wanted to say something right away, something that would make him feel safe, but I didn't want to rush it. That word meant something. Dad. It wasn't just a title. It was history. And Liam already had one. He didn't talk about his biological father much. Sometimes a photo would fall out of a drawer, or I'd hear his mom whisper his name when she thought Liam was asleep. From what I gathered, he left when Liam was still in diapers. No calls. No birthday cards. Just silence. I'd never tried to replace him. That wasn't my role. I was just trying to be present. Consistent. The guy who showed up to soccer games and parent-teacher nights. The one who always had snacks ready after school and asked about his day even when he didn't answer. I thought I was just earning a spot at the table. I didn't know I was earning something bigger. Liam stood there waiting, probably wondering if he'd made a mistake by asking. I saw the doubt creeping back into his face. He took a small step back, like he was preparing to take it all back. That's when I leaned down and looked him right in the eyes. But before I could say anything, the front door opened. His mom walked in, grocery bags in hand, smiling like she always did when she saw us together. I straightened up fast, and Liam stepped away like nothing had happened. The moment was gone. But it wasn't really gone. It was still there, just paused. Floating in the space between us. I glanced at him, hoping he knew the answer wasn't no, but it was also more than just yes. That word he asked me about, it carried stories. Pain. Hope. Maybe even healing. I knew we'd have to finish that conversation. But now, I wasn't just waiting for the right words. I was waiting for the right moment. That night, after Liam went to bed and the dishes were done, I sat on the couch, turning his question over in my head again and again. Do you think I could ever call you Dad? It echoed like a whisper in the back of my mind, hitting deeper the more I thought about it. My wife sat beside me, tired but peaceful, not knowing what had happened just a couple of hours earlier in that quiet kitchen. I didn't tell her, not yet. I wasn't keeping secrets. I just didn't know how to bring it up without feeling like I might somehow ruin it. Like naming the moment would break it. I was afraid that maybe Liam had already convinced himself it didn't matter, or worse, that I didn't care. I knew I needed to talk to her, but something inside me said to wait. Let it breathe. In the days that followed, things didn't go back to normal. At least not for me. Every time Liam looked at me, I caught a flicker of something in his eyes, like he was waiting for an answer I hadn't given. But just as quickly, he'd look away and bury himself in his schoolwork or video games. He didn't bring it up again, and neither did I. But the distance between us started to shift. Subtle, but real. He was quieter. Not cold, just hesitant. I noticed he stopped asking for help with his homework. He didn't follow me into the kitchen like he used to, not even when I made his favorite mac and cheese. It was like he was building a little wall, one brick at a time. And every second I stayed silent, I felt like I was letting him. Then something unexpected happened. A school project. Family tree. Of all things. He came home with the assignment in his backpack, tucked behind a folder with bent edges. I saw it by accident when I was grabbing a permission slip for a field trip. It asked for parents' names, siblings, heritage, basic stuff. But I knew right away it wasn't going to be simple for him. I handed it to him gently. "Wanna work on this together?" I asked. He shook his head without looking up. "I'll do it later." I didn't push. But later that night, I saw the paper in the trash, folded twice, with my name scribbled out. That hit me hard. He was trying to figure out where I fit. And maybe he thought I didn't. Or maybe he was scared I wouldn't want to. Either way, it was clear this wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a struggle. One that ran deeper than I'd realized. The next few days felt like walking on eggshells. Every time I tried to talk to Liam, he'd brush me off or give a short, distracted response. Even when I tried to make jokes, he'd force a smile, but it never reached his eyes. It was like something had shifted in him, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get through. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we were building, whatever fragile connection we had, was slipping through my fingers. One evening, about a week after the school project incident, I found him sitting on the back porch, staring out at the dark yard. It was colder than usual, and the wind was picking up, but he was still out there, wrapped in his hoodie. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to approach. He seemed lost in thought, and I knew if I said the wrong thing, it could make things worse. But something told me this was my chance. He hadn't been shutting me out because of a small thing. This was bigger. This was about the space between us, the distance I hadn't known how to bridge. I walked over quietly, sitting down next to him. The air smelled like wet leaves, and the soft rustling of the trees made the moment feel strangely intimate. He didn't look at me right away, but after a minute, he sighed and spoke, almost as if he'd been waiting for me to break the silence. "Why do you think my real dad doesn't care?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart sank. There it was, the question that had been hanging in the air, unspoken, for so long. I could feel my chest tighten, my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was about him, about the hurt he was carrying around, the confusion he was too young to fully understand. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. How could I answer that? How could I tell him something that would make all the pain go away? I looked at his face, searching for the right words, knowing whatever I said next would change everything. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words, but before I could speak, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted us. The headlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows across the yard. Liam didn't move. He just kept staring ahead, his fingers gripping the railing as if it could hold him together. I glanced over at the car, my stomach tightening. It wasn't just anyone, it was his biological father. I hadn't seen him in years, not since that awkward, tension-filled meeting when I first moved in with his mom. I'd never heard from him again, never even gotten a call, and for the most part, I had been okay with that. But now, with Liam sitting beside me, the situation felt different. His father's presence, out of nowhere, was like a storm rolling in, one that neither of us had expected. Liam's eyes flickered toward the car, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen before, fear. Not just fear of the unknown, but something deeper, fear of disappointment, fear of being abandoned once more. My heart sank for him. This wasn't the reunion I had been bracing for. This wasn't the ideal moment for a father to step back into the picture. Liam stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the wood of the porch. He didn't look at me. He just started walking toward the gate, his pace quickening with every step. Panic shot through me, but before I could catch up to him, I heard the familiar voice I'd hoped to avoid. "Liam, wait." His dad. Standing in the yard. Everything I had been trying to build with Liam, everything I thought we were moving toward, now felt like it was hanging by a thread. How was I supposed to compete with this? How was I supposed to explain the hole I hadn't even realized was growing between us? And then, just before I could reach him, Liam turned to face me. His eyes were filled with confusion, and something darker, something I hadn't seen in him before. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice shaking. "I'm not your son." Liam's words hung in the air like a punch to the gut. "I'm not your son." It wasn't anger or spite in his voice, more like raw confusion, like a kid who was trying to make sense of something too complicated for his age. I froze for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Everything I thought I understood about our relationship, about my role in his life, crumbled in that instant. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could I say? What could I possibly say to convince him that I wasn't trying to replace his real dad? That I cared about him in ways that went beyond a title, beyond the word dad? But before I could form any words, I saw his biological father step closer, his footsteps heavy in the silence. Liam's eyes darted between the two of us, a storm brewing behind them. "You're not helping, man," Liam's father said, his tone flat. "I'm here now." I felt my heart lurch. What was happening? Liam's father hadn't been around for years, and now, when things were starting to change, he showed up and threw everything into chaos. But Liam's eyes, those same eyes that had questioned me just days ago, shifted to the ground. He didn't run to his father. He didn't even reach out for him. Then, out of nowhere, Liam took a step back. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel anymore." He whispered the words, as if they were too heavy to say out loud. And that's when I understood. This wasn't about me versus his biological father. It wasn't even about the word dad. It was about Liam trying to figure out where he belonged, who he was in a world that kept shifting around him. "I'm here," I said softly, my voice steady, more certain than I'd ever felt before. And then, just as Liam looked up, his father turned and walked away without saying another word. Liam didn't ask me to be his dad. But that night, we both took a step towards something better, something real. The next few days were quieter, but in the best way. There were no big moments, no dramatic declarations. It was just us figuring things out in small, steady ways. Liam and I didn't have any deep conversations right away, but there were changes. He started asking for help with his homework again. He laughed when I accidentally spilled some cereal on the kitchen floor. And when we sat down for dinner, he didn't hesitate to sit next to me, like nothing had changed, like we were just two people sharing a meal. I never pushed the dad conversation again. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't the title, it was the trust, the quiet moments where he let me in. He didn't need to call me anything. He just needed to know I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't. As for his biological father, I didn't see him again after that night. I couldn't control what he did or didn't do. What I could control was the kind of person I was going to be in Liam's life. I didn't have all the answers, and I never would. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to stay in the unknown with him. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch together, Liam turned to me. His voice was quieter than usual, but there was something different in it, something soft. "You know," he said, "you don't have to be my dad. I think I'm good with you just being you." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes, the hardest things to say are the ones that don't need words at all. The space between us was finally filled, not by a label, but by understanding. By trust. And that was enough. 2.